Hello and welcome to AJS Guitar Channel. This is the start of a series on how to create cover tracks, and in this episode we're going to cover the drums. Before we get into that, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon to make sure that you get notifications and never miss out on any videos that I create in the future. Okay, let's get started. So I've picked High M, The Wire, and the last 12 bars of it to record and to do a cover of. So I thought we'd start by just listening and watching the girls play the guitar solo and the outro that we're going to cover at Glastonbury back in 2014. So let's hear that. So that's High M playing The Wire at Glastonbury in 2014. That's what we're going to try and reproduce through these series of videos. So we're going to start with the drums. Now, I don't play the drums. I don't even own a drum kit, but I want to be able to get a drum track that I can then play bass guitar, electric guitar over with the rhythm and the lead. So how do I go about doing that? Well, there's a freeware piece of software called Hydrogen that comes to the rescue here. Hydrogen is a drum machine. It's pattern based, and it basically allows you to set up the pattern of a bar of drums using recorded samples of each instrument within the drum kit. We're going to use Songster for all our tab. The reason being is that it provides all four parts. So we've got the drums, we've got the bass, we've got the rhythm guitar and the lead guitar all in here. So it's going to be useful for us throughout. And as I say, we're going to play the guitar solo and we're going to do the outro, which is the last 12 bars of the song. The tab here for the drums shows it as abbreviations for each instrument. So if we click on help here, it actually tells you what each of those abbreviations are. So let's look at Hydrogen. This is it here. Fairly straightforward pattern based tool. What we're going to do is look at what drum kit we want to use, what samples of drum instruments we want to have in this. So for our case, I'm going to pick this Black Pearl drum kit. The reason for that is that it has all the instruments we need. So it's got a bass drum, it's got a snare, it's got a closed hi-hat, it's got a crash cymbal. Later on we need the splash cymbal. Later on still we need a floor tom and a low tom. So it's got all of those just here. So we've got the kick, we've got the snare, we've got the floor tom, maybe floor tom, there we go. We've got the closed hi-hat, we've got the low tom, we've got a crash cymbal, and we've got a splash cymbal. So it's got all the recordings and samples that we need. So that's why we're going to use that. Now, this is actually a freeware recording that someone made that I then downloaded and was able to use. We can right click this and we can just hit load, and it all appears now on the left hand side within the pattern builder, which is great. Next thing is tempo. So right up here, if we double click, we can set the tempo. And if we go back to the tab, right up at the very top of the tab, we've got 112 BPM as the tempo. So we'll come back down to where we are, and we'll go back to Hydrogen and we'll set the tempo to 112. So there we go, we've got our tempo set, we're ready to go. Now we have 5 patterns in this tab. We've got this pattern here with the crash symbol. We'll call that pattern 1. We've then got pattern 2 here, similar pattern but slight difference. Pattern 2 is then repeated a couple of times, back to pattern 1, back to pattern 2, and then we've got right here we've got pattern 3, which is this snare at the end, and then we go into the outro, we've got pattern 4, repeated a couple of times, and then pattern 5 at the end here. So we've got 5 patterns of drums that we need to build. So how are we going to go about doing that? Well, first of all, this has got lots more patterns here than we need, so let's delete some of the other patterns so that we've got a cleaner interface. Okay, we've now got 5 patterns. So first of all, pattern 1. So here we are with pattern 1 down here. We know it's 4 beats, and we can do 16 as our resolution, which allows us to have 16 intervals across, which gives us our half beats as well. So going back to this, we've got, let's start with the bass drum. So we've got the bass drum on beat 1, we've got on the and of beat 2, as you can see here, and we've got on beat 3. So let's add that in. So we got on beat 1, there's the 2, there's the and of 2, and we've got on beat 3 as well. So that's 1, and of 2, and beat 3. Well, let's do the snare. It's on beat 2 and beat 4. So snare is on beat 2 and on beat 4, which is great. Then we've got the closed hi-hat, which is on beat 1, beat 3, and beat 4. So closed hi-hat is down here. We've got it on beat 1, beat 3, and beat 4. Then we have the crash cymbal, which is on beat 2. So back to hydrogen, crash cymbal's near the bottom, and it's on beat 2. So how does that sound? Let's have a listen to it. Sounds pretty good. One thing that might just add a bit of emphasis to it is to put some accents in. I know the accents aren't on the tab, but it might help the sound overall. So let's put an accent in on beat 1 and 3. So if we go to the kick, first of all, down here we've got velocity. Velocity is how fast is, if it was a real drummer, how fast are they hitting that drum with the drumstick. So you can think of this as actually how loud it becomes, because the faster you hit it, the louder the volume of that drum. So we're going to turn accent beat 1 and 3 of the kick here by just dragging up the velocity here to full on beats 1 and 3. And then we've got the closed hi-hat on the same beats, so we'll do the same for the closed hi-hat. And there's no other instruments being played on beats 1 and 3, so that's fine. So with the accent, here's how it sounds. So you can hear the emphasis on beats 1 and 3. That's great. Now let's look at pattern 2. So that's pattern 1 complete. Pattern 2 is this one here. Now the only difference between pattern 1 and pattern 2 is this closed hi-hat on beat 2 versus the crash cymbal in pattern 1. So instead of having to recreate pattern 2, let's delete pattern 2 as it currently stands. We'll take pattern 1 and we'll copy it and we'll call it pattern 2. So here we are with pattern 2 as a copy of pattern 1. The only difference was this crash cymbal. So if we take the crash cymbal out and we add in the closed hi-hat instead, we've now got pattern 2. So let's play that. So that sounds great as well. So that's pattern 2 complete. Let's move on to pattern 3. So with pattern 3, it's this last one in the guitar solo section. And what we can see is that it's got a triplet on beat 4, a triplet for the snare. So triplets in hydrogen can be done using a triplet resolution. So we're currently on a 16 interval resolution. If we change to 16T, the triplet version, you can see that the intervals that highlight on here have changed. So instead of 16th note intervals, what you actually get is these triplets. So each half beat has been split into a triplet. Now, we don't want a half beat as a triplet, we want a whole beat as a triplet. So to do that, every second triplet beat here would give us the 3 even intervals across the whole of that beat, giving us a triplet for a whole beat rather than for a half beat. So we can make use of this. So let's start again with this pattern. We've got the bass drum on beat 1, the and beat 2, and beat 3. So let's build that first of all. So beat 1, and beat 2, and beat 3. So we've got our kick drum in place. Next we'll do the closed hi-hat, which is on beat 1, 2, and beat 3. So our closed hi-hat on beat 1, beat 2, and beat 3. And then we have the splash cymbal on beat 4. So the splash cymbal is all the way down here, and that's going to be on beat 4. Great. Now comes the triplets. So the snare is on beat 2, and then a triplet on beat 4. So let's go do that. So beat 2, simple enough. Beat 4 we need a triplet. So as I say, if we count 2 intervals, we can get an even triplet across that whole beat. And that lets us get the pattern completed. Now again, let's put accents on beat 1 and 3. So there's 1, there's 3, there's 1, there's 3, and that's us. Now if we play this pattern, there's our triplet on the end there. That sounds great. Okay, on to the outro, pattern 4. So the outro has this simple 4-beat pattern with a rest on beat 3. So let's build that up. Bass drum first is only on beat 1. So there we go. The snare is on beat 2 and beat 4. So snare on beat 2 and beat 4, which is great. Now we need our splash cymbal also on beats 2 and 4. So down the bottom here we've got our splash cymbal, beat 2 and beat 4, and then we come to our crash cymbal on beat 1. So our crash cymbal is down here, and that's on beat 1. Now what we will do is we'll put an accent on beat 1. So let's do that with the kick and with the crash. But for beat 3, you can see we actually have a rest. We've got a rest in the tab here, and a rest in Hydrogen is just not having any instrument played on that particular beat. So we can see that here. If I play this now, sounds pretty good. So that's pattern 4 completed. Let's go to pattern 5. So pattern 5 is our outro, our last bar of our outro, and it's got this floor and low tom triplet feel across the entire bar. So let's start with the low tom. We've got a triplet on the first beat and a triplet on the third beat. So let's find our low tom. It's tom 2, and again triplets, so we're doing it every 2 intervals on the 16T resolution. So there's our low tom on beat 1, and I think it was on beat 3, just remind myself. Yep, beat 3. So we do the same again here. Then we move on to the floor tom, which is triplet on beat 2. So our floor tom is just here, and again triplet there on beat 2. Then we've got our snare, which is a triplet on beat 4. So there's our snare. Oops, there's our snare, and that's a triplet on beat 4. So there we go. And then finally we have a splash cymbal on the first and last beat of the triplet, which starts on beat 4. So let's add that in as well. So that's a splash cymbal, and it's on the first beat of the triplet, we have a rest on the second beat of the triplet, and we have the splash again on the last beat of the triplet, just there and there. And if we come back to this, I'm not going to be putting any accents on this pattern at all. So we're just going to run with this as it is. So let's hear it. So you can hear all those tom fills going on there. So that sounds great. Now we need to try and put it all together. How are we going to go about doing that? So what Hydrogen allows you to do is build up the patterns across the entire song with this grid at the top. So what we can do is we can say our first bar is pattern 1, followed by 3 bars of pattern 2. So let's build that. So we can say pattern 1 for bar 1, and then 3 bars of pattern 2, so we can just click those on, which is great. Then we have a bar of pattern 1 and 2 bars of pattern 2. So a bar, pattern 1, 2 bars, pattern 2. And then the last bar for the solo is pattern 3. So we can add in pattern 3 there for the solo. So that's our solo drum beat sequence completed. Then we've got our outro. So our outro is 3 bars of pattern 4 followed by 1 bar of pattern 5. So 3 bars, pattern 4, 1 bar, pattern 5. If we flip to listening to the song now, and I've got it on repeat as well, we can play through the entire song. So let's listen to that. So that sounds okay, but it sounds a little robotic. It sounds like a machine. You can tell it's been sampled and not played by a human. So how do we go about making it sound a bit more human? Well, that's where a feature in Hydrogen comes in called humanizing. So if we bring up the mixer, on the right hand side of the mixer there are some humanization settings here. So one is velocity, another is timing, and another is swing. So let's play the pattern, play the whole song in the background while we do this. So let's start with velocity. So what happens if I turn this up to full? It sounds a bit weird. What it's actually doing is it's randomizing the velocity of the notes. So sometimes you're getting a louder note, sometimes you're getting a quieter note. And if we put this up to the extreme level, it doesn't sound right. But if we were to just put a little bit of this, maybe about there, it's sounding a little more human, because humans don't always hit the beat at exactly the same velocity, exactly the same rate. So this gives a bit more of a human feel to the drums. We can then do the same with timing. If I turn timing all the way up, humans don't always hit the beat bang on. Sometimes they're a bit early, sometimes they're a little bit late. If you listen to this when it's full on, it sounds pretty bad, because it's like a drummer who can't actually keep time. What we want to do is we want to lower that down and just add a little bit, not too much, because the timing being off isn't great for us. We want it to be reasonable, but it still sounds very human, and that's great. So whilst this is playing, one other thing to point out in the tab. If we go up to the very top of the tab, we can see this symbolism here. Now what that's saying is that we need a swing beat, or if you're talking in blues it's called a shuffle beat. And Hydrogen allows us to do that too. So if we bring up that mixer again, it's playing away in the background here. It's got swing here, so this allows us to add a swing or shuffle beat. And basically all that means is that every half beat you play the first beat longer than the second beat. And so you shorten the second beat into almost a triplet feel to it. So I can turn this all the way up and we get more of a swing feel to the overall beat. But that's a bit too much, it's a bit too short on the second beat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this down to about halfway, roughly, and I think that sounds pretty good for what we want. So let's go with that. We need to obviously save this. So we will call it The Wire, and we'll save it there. And then the next thing we need to do is actually take it out of Hydrogen and get it into our DAW software so that we can mix it. And later on, when we do the other episodes, mix it with the other instruments, the guitar recordings and so on. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing we do is we export it as a song. We're going to call it thewire.wav, that's fine. Now, I always use export to separate tracks, and the reason for doing that is to allow it to have a separate WAV file for each of the instruments. And that lets me, when I import it into waveform, which is what I'm going to be using here as our DAW, it lets me have them as separate tracks, and therefore I can mix those tracks differently. I can set the volume differently. I can change the pan and so on for each individual instrument within the drums, rather than having a single drum track. So let's create a new project. We'll call it The Wire, and we've got a blank new project, which is great. So I'm just going to get rid of this sample screen on the left, and I'm going to bring the bottom up so that we can see what's going on. So let's take track 8 here. We've got our export of the audio file, so we'll import it back in. So here we go, we've got all of the files here. And we called it The Wire, so I'm just going to look for The Wire. There it is there. And we can see each of the instruments within our drum kit have individual files. So let's start at the bottom and work our way up. Let's start with the splash. So we're going to make a copy of the file and import it into here. That's great. We need to name the track as well. So we'll call it drums. We'll put a little hyphen, and then we'll call this the splash. And then we'll do the next one. So our next one, again, right down the bottom, we've got our closed hi-hat. We'll make a copy of that. We'll call it drums, and we'll just do HH for hi-hat, and then we'll do the next one. Again, we're importing each of the individual instruments, so we've got the crash cymbal. We make a copy. We want to name the track so it's obvious what it is. So it's drums, and this is the crash cymbal, so we'll call it drums crash. The next track, next instrument in our drum kit is, in this case, the floor tom. Again, we'll make a copy, and we'll rename the track drums floor tom. And then our next one is our low tom. So let's make a copy of that, name the track. And then the next one, again, is our snare. So make a copy of the snare, we name the track. And then I think this is our last one. Let's have a look. Snare, and then the kick. So we make a copy of that, and we name it drums kick. Awesome. So let me just save all of that. So we've now got, if I zoom in a little, we've now got all of our drums here as each instrument separately. So if I play this from the beginning, you'll get to hear what our drum track, our finished drum track sounds like within our DAW here. So let's hear it. And that's our drum track finished. We've been able to use hydrogen to produce it, and I think that's great. So stay tuned for the next video for episode 2, where we'll be talking about the bass guitar and recording that and adding it into our mix over our drum track. So thanks very much for listening, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much. Bye now.